Good morning. Welcome. Welcome. We're so glad you're here. It's great to have everyone here. I'm Rebecca Lindsay. My husband, Michael, is our new president of Gordon College. Not only am I a wife and a mother of 3 girls, but I'm also the ambassador for the college. And as the official ambassador, it's my duty and privilege to say, welcome back. It's great to see so many staff and students and alum. It's so good to see you. And there's so many reasons to love Gordon College. The beautiful campus, the wonderful fall weather, the outstanding academics. But what draws Michael and me here and what distinguishes it from all the other schools is its people. And today I think you will see just that. This panel of distinguished alumni is comprised of women from medicine, philanthropy, business, and the arts. So we are indeed in for a real treat. If you would, please hold your applause for the end, and as I introduce each one of our distinguished guests. Over here to my left, we have Dr. Lisa Spencer, class of '95. She is Assistant Professor of Medicine at Harvard Medical School. She's done extensive research, and the part that I understand or can make sense of is on immunology, microbiology, and infectious disease. And she has published in numerous journals and publications and has won numerous awards from medical associations. So it's quite a privilege to have her. She's married to Gordon, Gordon grad as well, Jeff, 96, I believe. And is a mother of 2. She has a 10-year-old and an 8-month-old. Yeah, and she's also moving, I heard this week, and packing up. So it is a real honor and treat that you would come back. So thank you for coming. Beside her is Linda Bang Damiani. She's a native New Yorker, a Barrington grad of '78. And she worked in the private sector for many years and then decided to stay home and raise her 3 children. Her oldest, some of you may know, was Catherine, who graduated in 2010 from Gordon. And you're currently on the Gordon College Alumni Board and also a trustee at Barrington Christian Academy. She's also a board member for the We Care Children's Center and a volunteer at Barrington Baptist Church, a very busy lady. So we're very glad that you're with us as well. Over here is Laura Fasti-Grassi, who's an '81 graduate of Gordon. She has a very impressive title. I hope I can get this right. She's the Director for Global Supplier Relations for the Business Travel Division of American Express Travel-Related Services. That's a mouthful. I think she's a busy person. She and her team negotiate and manage a large portfolio of air, car, and hotel suppliers, including companies like American Airlines, British Airways, Hertz, Marriott, and Intercontinental, to name only a few. And prior to being at American Express for 15 years, you were at American Airlines. And she was originally from Western Mass, but now is living in the Dallas-Fort Worth area with her husband and daughter, who I'm told wore a Gordon College shirt this past week on your favorite college day at high school. So she was probably the only one. She's setting a new trend. Oh, elementary. Okay, so she's a little young. We'll work on them. Last but not least is Kimberly McCoy, an '08 graduate. Kimberly is the Performing Arts Director for the 6 North Shore YMCAs. And as the director, she has developed 10 camp productions, or 10 main stage shows, and then 9 camp productions involving over 500 North Shore youth. She's working on her Master's of Theater Education at Emerson College, and is a newlywed, got married this summer, and lives in Beverly with her husband. So, please welcome a warm fantastic. So since our panel is on faith and family and career, I will ask the million-dollar question. How do you balance faith, family, and career? What specific things, strategies, approaches help you navigate this careful balance that we're all trying to figure out? I think that's why you have such a great attendance here. We're all trying to figure out, how do you do this? What is the magic formula? And I'm not sure there is one, but I think we can learn from one another from specific things that have been helpful or been good guides for you. And Maybe Laura, do you want to start us out, figuring out, you've been in this business for quite some time. How do you make it all work?
Well, I would not say I'm an expert by many means, and 3 of my college roommates are here to remind me that I'm not the expert. But I do think I love, find what you love to do and can get paid for it. So I do love business and the industry, and so I was able to successfully navigate that. But also to find a company that is flexible in what you need. So whether it's a company that lets you work at home, which mine does, whether it's a company that believes in women and development and training, and certainly having mentors in your life. One thing that Gordon does do, and I'm not giving a plug just because I'm a Gordon grad, but Gordon gave me great foundation, not only professors and leadership, but also friends that keep you honest with yourself. And throughout your career, whether you're struggling with a family issue, a career issue, a major move, you have them to bounce great things off of. So.
Good advice, good advice. Lisa, you're juggling quite a lot these days. What are some specific, concrete things that you do weekly that kind of help you keep a check on everything?
Yeah, this month might not be the best one for these questions. I mean, pray, I think is the leading right there. Because, and maybe the women will disagree, but there is no magic formula. I've had students ask me as well, and you know, I want to do this. Can I do this with the family? And the answer is it all depends on who your family is and where God puts you and what resources you have available, and those are all variables that we really, I don't think, can control necessarily at the get-go. So I rest in the fact that I want to be where God is putting me. I want to be where God has prepared me to be and where He's prepared the place as well, not just preparing me, but preparing that place. And I trust that that's where I'm going to be, and I trust that that is the right place for me to be, and I have to let everything else go. So I have my priorities, and it's in prayer constantly to say, am I in line with these, Lord? Are you guiding these priorities? And then just really stepping back and trusting that I'm going to move forward. I work very, very hard, and as that is blessed, and as God moves that forward, then I know that that's where I can be. But if I come to a place where I have a decision, where I have to give up one of my priorities, then that's the answer. I may not get that goal. And so that, I think, has been the toughest part for me, is to be sitting here as a student saying, this is what I want to do with my life, and having no idea if that's really an option down the road. But had I not kept moving down that path, being worried that I couldn't juggle it all, I would never be here. And so what God knew back then was He was going to give me Jeff as a husband. And Jeff can cook. And he does it really well. And in fact, I think most people in our family prefer it when he cooks. I see my daughter up there nodding and smiling. And so, you just don't know how God is working it out, but I think that's the key, of trusting in God's providence, trusting that that's where you want to be, wherever that brings you, whether it's in the home or outside of the home.
You brought up a good point, one that I was thinking about. I wanted to know, what role does your spouse play in your success? Or maybe it's not your spouse, maybe it's another significant family member, another neighbor. Because I think as women, we can't do it all by ourselves. I think I'm learning that. I don't like that lesson, but I think I'm learning this slowly. So we do need help. So I'm curious to know what role your spouse, or maybe some other family member, what role do they play in your success in your life? Anyone can jump at that one.
Sure.
Lisa.
We got the newlywed
Well, I'm resonating with so much that's being said, but something about Jake and I, my husband and I, met through my job. So he built the stage for the first show that I directed for the Y. And I work a lot, and I trust that I've been placed in this position and that I'm there for a purpose, but it's a lot of work. And so I needed a man in my life who not only understood that, but was supportive of that work. And my husband is with me through it all, and he works full-time as well. But my staff know, and my students all know, and they call him my man friend. And yeah, and he builds things and he hangs things, and or he'll just stand in the back of the performance with me and rub my back and tell me it's good. And now that I'm going to grad school full time as well, I mean, he's picking me up at the train station at 11 o'clock at night, or has dinner waiting when I get home. He cooks too. So I think my husband is huge. Knowing that any decision I make professionally or in education or whatever, that he's supportive of that and we're making that decision together is vital. And then my mom is who I bounce everything off of. If I'm crying in the midst of a rehearsal because it's hard and something's gone wrong with my students, she's who I'll slip out and call, or where I can bounce creative ideas off of, or help. She's a teacher, help problem solve from having student difficulty. Yeah, so really, I think having those people that I trust, but also that are in it with me, is vital to my success.
Yes, so true. Looking back at either your family life or your career, can you look back when you had one of those tough decisions and you really weren't sure what the right call was or what the right thing to do was, maybe with your child? But you can look back now and say, you know, that was tough, but I got it right. I'm curious to know what can you look back to your family life, your career, and say, that was a hard call, but you know what? It may have been tough at the time, but I got it right. Linda, can you think of a time?
It was definitely to stay home to raise the children. It was a very difficult decision on my part. My husband didn't think it was hard at all, but he's gay. He's a small businessman. We've been married for 28 years, and to him it was just a given because his family had always done that, so why wouldn't we? And I had a different viewpoint of that. And it was a very difficult adjustment, very, very difficult adjustment. Parenthood is the toughest job you'll ever do, bar none. And my firstborn was very driven, type A, at about 3 hours old. So, you know, it was a little hard. But once I got into that, I almost treated that, I had to take my mindset and say, okay, this parenthood thing, I need to be as organized as I am when I was outside the home. And certain things that I had learned in the working world, I transferred it into the home. It's like, okay, this is what we're going to do this afternoon, this is what we're going to do here. And that worked for my personality, and to be a volunteer. Even when the kids were small, it was like, okay, you know, mom's going to go out and do this now at church, mom's going to go do this at the school. That kept the network going and the connections, and I felt that it kept me fresh in what was going on out there, which was wonderful, and it's translated into, you know, going back to work. It's tough when your husband's gone, you know, 6 days a week, sometimes 10, 12 hours a day, as a small business person is a lot of times. I felt, well, the kids were mine when they misbehaved, but, you know, I learned that early on. You balance it out, and you just have that network, and he couldn't always be there for me to bounce ideas off of, or to bounce thoughts. That's where the friends came in, from church, from school. You have those connections during college. I had fabulous professors at Barrington. I still live in Barrington, so I still see some of them. That's my network. They're the ones that you can pick up the phone, you can email and say, am I going crazy? Or is this really, you know, no, this is, you know, and you can talk things out. Just keep that network.
Isn't it also important to know what your own needs are? Because what my needs are may not be what Laura's needs are, or her most important needs. And sometimes I think it's hard to identify. My husband is very good at identifying. He knows what my needs are, I think, sometimes better than I do. So he's really good about saying, okay, you're going to need this. You know, you're going to be unhappy if you don't have this way or that way. And it's so true. I'm learning that I need help, which I really don't like a lot of help. I like to be very independent and do it my way and be in control. But I'm also realizing I need help, but I also need space where I don't always have help. I need time that's just me and my girls and nobody else, whether that's the plumber or a Gordon Dan Timon, who I love, or even my husband. I just need, as much as help and as much things we have going on. I'm starting to realize that's a need I have some just personal space with my children. I also need help, but learning to find what that balance is. And also, if you're extrovert, you know that you need friends, you need outside sources, you need to be connected. That may not be true if you're more introverted, and that may not be a need you have. But as an extrovert, I definitely feel that same way. Well, let me flip that question. Looking back, go back to your family career, faith, when can you look back and say, I really messed up? If I could go back and do that again, make that decision for my child differently, or make a different career move, what would you do differently? What could you go back and say, that was not, I got it wrong that time, or perhaps I got it wrong. If I could do it again, I would do it differently. Laura, do you need thoughts?
I have a small one. I had a child at 41. I did not find Mr. Wonderful at Gordon College. I found him when I was about 34, married at 37. We were lucky and blessed to have a child at 41. So I'm in Texas, and there's a lot of moms that are about a lot younger than I am. My mess up was because I was a new mother, and I had a really stressful job at that point. It's gotten so much better. But I had to travel a lot, and fortunately my husband had a flexible job where he would give up time. But American Express offered me the opportunity to work from home, and I did not think I could transfer this office, which was about 20 minutes away, into my home. I thought I'd work 24/7, and now in hindsight, for the first 6 years of my daughter's life, I was coming home too late. My husband didn't go to work till 1. She was with daycare in our home for 5 hours. I wish I had taken the company's offer to move at home. Even though there was someone downstairs, I have a little regret that I didn't take those flexible things sooner, because I didn't think I could manage. And now that I have worked at home for 6 years, it's been just wonderful.
Anyone else have any thoughts about that?
I mean, when I had my first child, Emily's 10 right now, and I was in grad school, and there, was at the top of my class, and there were a few of the professors who did not think it was appropriate that a female student who was sort of their poster child was pregnant in graduate school. That didn't go over terribly well. So they would schedule all of my talks right around the due date. So here I am, 9 months pregnant, and speaking. I mean, the room is full of physicians. I mean, the worst that can happen is going to happen. But at the same time, it's just not conducive. So I decided I needed to prove to them that I was Superwoman and could handle it all. So I didn't cancel any of those presentations. I did them all, and then she didn't show up the day I thought she'd come, so I actually had to give them all. And I took 2 weeks off for maternity leave, and that was a mistake. And I tried to bring her to daycare, and I couldn't do it. I got to the parking lot, turned around, and left, and went home. So we ended up working it out a different way. One of us was with her, so I would stay home with her during the day, and he'd go to work, and then he'd come in, and I'd leave at 6 o'clock at night and work all night because I was in my dissertation at that point. And it was just dumb. I mean, there's no other way to put it. You don't have to be Superwoman. You don't have to prove to these other individuals that you're not going to sacrifice, you're going to work just as hard, because you know what, we are working just as hard. And if you don't accomplish what you need to accomplish, you're not going to make it anyway. So you really don't have to worry about whether you're physically in that room from 9 to 5. That's just not the question anymore. So I did it right with Will. I took a 3-month maternity leave. And I was in and out of the hospital, and I had people sending me data daily, and I was analyzing it, but I liked that. That was my release. It was easier, actually, to let someone else, watch him for a few minutes while I was analyzing the data. So I really did it wrong with my daughter, but I think God was gracious to give me the chance to redo it with Will, but not to make a decision to prove yourself.
Well, she looks pretty good. I think she turned out pretty well. Maybe it had been harder on you, perhaps.
I think it was definitely harder on me. I don't really remember those first few months.
I understand that completely. Well, Lisa's talked about this a little bit, but I wonder if the others of you can share about times that you've gone through either pain or loss or financial limitations that you've been able to overcome and still achieve your goals. adversities have you overcome along the way to get where you are?
I can speak to that a bit. My husband has MS, multiple sclerosis, and it started within the first 6 months. Well, it had been going on for much longer than that, but he was diagnosed within the first 6 months of our being together, dating, which meant about 4 months into dating each other, he spent a week in the hospital and I was there with him, and it meant putting off our wedding for a year because he was diagnosed with a disease, and it was something that we had to process and turn into part of our lives before we felt like we could make that next step. So there was, I mean, it was hard in a lot of ways because not only was he diagnosed with MS, but I felt that that was a diagnosis for both of us for the rest of our lives, and then in that to be putting off our wedding too for a year, that was really hard for both of us. So it was something we had to really go through and pray through together, and separately a lot, and process. But because we did it prayerfully, and because our families are so supportive, and we knew we were in it together. It was a decision we were making together, every decision. We both had peace about it, but it didn't make it less difficult. And still, I mean, it's still, the MS thing's not going to go away, so that's something that's still difficult and that we still deal with. But I think we had peace about it, knowing that we were in it together, and knowing that we were putting off the wedding, but for a good reason. And then when the time came, it was beautiful. I just had a friend. I had so many friends and family at the wedding who, because they knew that backstory, it was such a really moving ceremony because they knew what we were choosing together. And I think we see our time as really precious, and we make decisions, I think, to not, we make a point not to lose time. I think when we argue, it feels like we're wasting time. So we try to reconcile more quickly. Yeah.
Kimberly has a great blog called Just Enough Foolishness, and there's some beautiful wedding pictures and a little bit about what she's doing, so if you're interested in knowing more about Kimberly's journey, it's Just Enough Foolishness. Fantastic, fantastic. Wow, it's been a great journey. I also want to know, what would you say, because I want to save some time for questions in the audience here at the end, if you can name one thing specifically that you received from your Gordon college education that has helped you in your career and your family life, what is that one thing that you've taken away from Gordon that's been most helpful? So open that up to anyone.
I think perspective for me. It was, I just think of the different elements. I remember sitting in Grace Jew's office one day telling her, her biochemistry class was outrageous. And so, I'm trying to explain to her how much we have going on in our lives, and how, my basketball tournaments are, it's semifinals right now, and we're trying to balance everything else, and how do you expect us to know this entire poster full of pathways? And she just looked at me and said, you know what, go outside and hug a tree. I was like, what? It was years later to try to keep dealing with that, because she's right. Like, get your perspective, look at the big picture, see where you are in the world. And playing softball with Val Jin, it was the same thing. We'd pour our hearts into these games, and she's so competitive, and she was such a good coach, and we worked very hard. But at the end of the day, we'd come out with our heads swollen because we had just won this game, and she would just sit us down and, again, put us back in the world, and put it back in the perspective of, yes, congratulations, you did all that work, you won a softball game. So it just it's been a really good lesson for me going forward, to get my head out of my little world and pick your head up, look around, what is God doing? Because I'm pretty sure that God's entire purpose here is not just for me to get this paper done and out and published. It's a much bigger purpose.
I think the takeaway from when I my time at Barrington was that I had the freedom. I was so thrilled when Gordon came out with the freedom within a framework of faith, because that's what I had always felt at Barrington. My very first day of class as a freshman, 9 a.m., I heard those words, "Good morning, friends and neighbors," because Roger Green was my Old Testament teacher. And I thought, okay, it's gonna be okay, because it gave me a chance to question, it gave me a chance to grow, and there were adults there, very experienced adults, who could guide me, and that I could bounce questions off of the craziest things that I could think of, and they would say, well, you know, first off, have you asked the Lord about this, you know? And secondly, this is what worked for me, or this is what has worked for other students, you know, and to be able to do that and to just be immersed in that was just a fantastic experience.
What about you ladies? What's the one concrete thing you can name about your Gordon education that's been helpful?
I would say, you know, that buzzword, I think they still use it, but integrating our faith and learning back in '81. And, you know, I did not grow up in a Christian family. I, church going, but really didn't understand the Gordon stuff and what it meant and all, but beyond Gordon, the world. So I think it was cool because I did move to New York City, and I think it was important for me to connect with believers. And fortunately, through your work, but also having that sort of other activity, whether it's now in Dallas, whether you have to have, I'm working in a secular organization, but there's lots of believers, but there's also a lot of different faith views and worldviews and non-views. It's great to have that integration, and it started at Gordon because it was late in my high school through Young Life that I became a believer, but it was Gordon that said, these are really smart professors up here teaching, and they're smart, and they're integrating with whatever discipline their faith, and they're cool about it. So it wasn't a stigma, it was more of a joy, and to make sure I was connected wherever I lived with believers, with a firm church, and then to outreach to the people you are working with. That has been my sort of Gordon lesson.
How do you let your faith shine through at work without alienating your coworkers? Because that's a very careful balance, isn't it? To be faithful, but yet also the work environment sometimes can be hostile. How do you?
Unless you live in Texas.
Not everyone can live in Texas. Any way you've navigated that faith and work journey in the office?
You know, I don't like to shove anything down someone's throat. I think you have to be a light, and you have to be salt, and you have to just be, they'll often come to you. Sometimes some people might want to hear it, others may not. A lot of different faith. I lived in New York City, and you know, I have a lot of Jewish friends, a lot of Muslim friends. You just are your faith, and they're going to connect. I recently had a woman who finally asked me, and I didn't realize she was asking me. She wanted to go to church for years and never asked. It was through a childhood friend of my daughter's, and finally she said, "Could I just come with you on Sunday?" And I'm like, "What was I thinking? You know, why didn't I do this sooner?" So, just being a light.
Lisa, what's it like in the medical field?
You're taking this, right?
For only selected audiences, though.
And it's tough sometimes, but I think you really hit it right on the head. There is a difference in who we are, whether we intentionally do it or not. There is a difference, and God has really brought people to me. And sometimes it's been argumentative, and I've had some, tough cookies who have seeking me out and asking the questions, yet getting very loud about it and very hostile. So you know that God's doing something in that life, but it's the day in and day out. I mean, it's a stressful environment, and it's a very competitive environment. So they're looking for mistakes, which is unfortunate, but you're constantly feeling like you're under this microscope. So it's hard to let your gentleness be evident to all when you're there for 9 or 10 hours and it's grant crunch time, or you're at a conference and it's 10 hours straight of speaking and interacting. It's tough to let your gentleness be evident to all, but I think it's the day in and day out, just prayerfully begging for the strength to live humbly, and that all shine through. And above all, I feel like God has just fixed all of my mistakes. He's redeemed so many opportunities that I've either missed or misspoken or thought I wanted to answer every question that was being asked with every theology known to man. And I'd go home, and Jeff was a seminary student, and I'd say, okay, I need the Greek for what this passage in the New Testament really is saying, because, and you know, yeah, maybe some of that was helpful, but I think in the end, it's the times when your colleague is going through something and no one else knows because this is the professional world and you don't talk about that, and you can walk alongside them. It's those types of interactions. I lost my mom my first year of my postdoctoral fellowship, and she was sick through graduate school. In fact, that's why I went to that graduate school, so I could sit with her in between classes. That's where she was being treated. But you know, that was a horrible experience. But through that, other people have now come to approach me because they saw that. They saw, you know, that you just keep getting up and going to work in the morning, and you don't know what those seeds are until they come back later and start asking those key questions. So I think, honestly, the Holy Spirit's doing work. It's not us. But we have to be willing to be used and have to be willing to be in it for the long haul, because it's the daily interactions and the relationships that we're building, and those little decisions. You know, do you someone in your lab has just done this data, are you sure you give them all of the credit for it in this presentation? I mean, all of these little things along the way that you have to be so careful about being so above board on that I think really stands out to our colleagues.
It's all very relational, isn't it?
Very relational. And accepting that, you know what, and again, the only one who's like this, but you make so many mistakes, but that's okay. You know, it's just, you keep going, and God does redeem those mistakes.
Well, I'd like to open up our last little bit of time here and let some of you ask questions for our panel. It's such a distinguished group. Maybe there's a question. I have lots more that I can ask, but I would love for you, if you'd like an opportunity to ask one. This is your chance to ask our famous panelists here.
And our host.
And I have more questions than answers, but I will do my best. Yes. All right.
I just want to say thank you. I just talked to you a little bit briefly. I happen to work at the Sloan Work and Family Research Network at Boston College, which studies these issues of how you find this fit between work and family. And I was just thrilled that Gordon was having this conversation, because I think I kind of grew up with a misconception that it was all or nothing. You chose family or you chose work, and you couldn't do both. And so I'm now on-ramping. But I also just want to put a plug in also. We're transitioning to the Work and Family Researchers Network at UPenn. So we're changing a little bit, and we're focusing more on academics and researchers. So the website itself might not be that helpful to folks, but we also do have a social networking sites which would be really helpful. We had some blogs, we're always tweeting, which is something new for me, but tweeting on this issue. So if anybody's interested, the Twitter is @WFRN, and I don't know what the Facebook one is, but if you just do a search for Work and Family Researchers Network. But just thank you so much for having this conversation. I'll put a plug in for next year being a panel of men. That's what I've learned most about my work at the Sloan Clinic, is that men are really struggling more than women now to balance both. So they're not given the same flexibility often at work that women are, or seen as, you know, fully committed to take it.
Interesting. Yes.
First, I would like to echo that. Thank you for this gift that you've given us. You talked a lot about your lives, your accomplishments. I guess I'd like to ask you how you would like to be remembered, whether you've established your legacy or whether there's more still to come.
Great question. Who wants to take a stab at that?
I'm a baby, so I hope I haven't established my legacy yet. I have a whole lot more that I want to do. I'm in grad school right now, so I think that's pretty apparent that I have a lot more places I want to go, and my husband and I have a lot of things we want to achieve together as well. But I mean, Steve Jobs died this week. That's a huge, legacy building man. but I think something so interesting that he said, and something that I think like can apply to all of us, is that he thought he was going to die by 40, but he lived to 56. So he died young, but he lived as if, you know, what would my legacy be today if I died? So I think that's something like interesting that you pull out, that my first reaction is, I'm a baby, I have so much more to live. But it is interesting to question, what would my legacy be today? And so I think it's something that we have to live with. Like, what have we already established in our lives? What are the relationships that would be, you know, honoring us when we were gone? And still working towards the future. But I think of that in my work, that I don't want the theater company I started to fall apart if I were gone. I want it to be sustainable. Yeah, kind of living in a way that you would be replaceable, honestly, is I think, hopefully, a legacy.
Well, I'm a teacher by training, and I'd just gone back to work when I found out I was expecting twins. So, but I've been a classroom teacher for 10 years. And so my love and passion is for children. Now I have 3 of my own. So I would hope that children, either of my own or that have been students of mine, look back and say that I made a difference in their life. And if you've made a difference in one person's life, then that's really enough, isn't it? And especially when it's a child, it's all the more sweet. And now that we're at Gordon College, that I hope that I can make a difference in young people's lives, and that they'll go out and help and mentor the next generation.
And I want, not to quote Proverbs, but I want my children to grow up and call me blessed, honestly. I mean, a Nobel Prize would be really nice, don't get me wrong. That'd be fantastic. But I was reading, one of my colleagues, actually my mentor, his father was a Nobel Prize winner, and I'm sure you haven't seen this video. I'm reading through the obituary when he passed away, and he's a great man. So many people wrote wonderful, wonderful things about him, but I kept flipping through to see what his kids would say. And the one comment that I found was one of his sons was recounting the time he came home and he's had the measles or something, and his father wanted to culture his serum because that's what he was doing in the lab. He was developing a polio vaccine. So that's not what I want in my, I mean, that would be fine as a side note, but I want my obituary to read that my children, have these wonderful memories and are now going to go out into the world carrying something of what I've taught them with them. And
You can have it all. That's right. Yes, Corinne?
Thank you all for being out today. In the spirit of inspiring the next generation and the opportunity you have to briefly kind of summarize what that means to you, what would you say to all of the young women in this room and in regards to female leadership in our daily time?
I'll say, don't trust in God and don't limit yourself. I never thought I'd be living in New York City. I'm not a captain of industry, but I've certainly had enough opportunity to see the world, motivate people, do some really fun things. So whether you're a biology major, a Bible major, or teaching, political science, whatever, don't limit yourself. Just, I just read on the boat lift that was about 9/11, a boat driver coming to the rescue who said, I never want to live my day saying I should have. And that's why he went to rescue that day, even though he didn't know what his end fate would be, and he did live. But don't live your life saying you should have. And trust in God, and give it to God, like you said. Trust in the Holy Spirit to lead you where He's going to lead. Doors open, doors close, and that's not a mistake. That's divine when it does.
And whatever is right for you, between you and the Lord, because, back when I was starting a family, there were the famous mommy wars going on. You either worked or you stayed home, and there was not always a lot of agreement between those two groups. I was so glad to see all of that end, hopefully, because we're all in this together, and we're all believers together, and we take it to the Lord and we say, what is right for me? not for my best friend, not for my next door neighbor, not for my cousin or my mom. What's right for me? When I graduated from college, boy, I had it all figured out. I had a plan. It wasn't the Lord's plan. And he was gentle but very firm. The doors would close. You know, I said, but I want to go this way. No, I'm going to go this way. And just to put him at the center of everything and just, it's your life and your plan with the Lord, no one else's.
I think I was an actor before I was a director, and I always, when I'm acting, I try my hardest to trust the director, that they cast me in this role because they saw something in me that made them think I was capable of playing this role. And I take that into real life, in that I was cast in this role for some reason. And even in my weakest moments, in my most overwhelmed moments, when I am feeling like there's no reason why I, of all people, have been cast in this role, I have confidence knowing that I have been placed where I am. And that because of that, I'll have the strength. And for some reason, the people around me and all of those things, I'm the one who's supposed to be here. So yeah, I think just trusting that you've been placed and that you'll be guided elsewhere when the time comes, being present where you are and wherever you're taken.
All right, we'll have time for one last question. Yes.
I think probably you're the one woman who has maybe worked with having teenagers. My husband and I both direct ministries, and I'm starting to realize that you think you can go back to work when your kids get older, and their memories are strongest of their teenage years and what dinners were like and all that. When did you go back, and how did you handle them?
They were older. My kids are now 23, 20, and 15, and the first one, she was in college. Wow. When I returned, and once again, as I said, it's what's right for each individual family and person. I was fortunate enough to have a husband who was really into his work, and he could support us on one income. It wasn't always easy, it never is, but that's what I discovered, is that when they come home from 1st and 2nd grade, they're just looking for a Lunchable, they just want a snack, it's ramen noodles, whatever, yeah, exactly. But when they come home from middle school and high school, those are the times, and even the college age ones. My son is 20, and he graduated from high school and opted not for college, but he's in flight school. He's getting his pilot's license. And he'll still, he's far too cool to be seen with me most of the time, but he will still call me and say, Mom, what about this? And I find that a lot of times they look for you much more. Texting is the best thing that happened to motherhood. And it is, because now they can communicate with you. Nobody has to know they're asking you questions. It's like, my car won't start. It's like, okay, pop the hood. And they're just like, yeah, I got this. So it's great. It's fantastic. Just a little sidebar there.
Just a little addendum too. If it's any sort of comfort or affirmation, I don't know. My mom, I'm not a mother yet, but my mom worked full time my entire growing up, still does, and both my parents always have. But my mom's a teacher, and so she was home when I got home. And when I was in high school, I was the only one left at home, the youngest. And my mom and I became best friends because I would stand at the counter while she was cooking dinner, and I would tell her everything. And that was so important, and still to our day, this day, that shapes our relationship, because it was so grounded in those formative years, the teenage years. So even when you are working full time, that relationship can still be formed. I don't know if that's affirmation or.
Well, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for coming to our panel. If you have time this afternoon, you won't want to miss conversations with the president at 4:30 here in this building. Also, women's soccer is getting ready to start on the quad in a few minutes. I feel like a cruise director. 2:30, the men will follow out in the quad, and we definitely hope we see you around. But before you leave, won't you join me in one last round of applause for our family?